I was promised to the Alpha King before I could speak. Now he came to claim his promised sacrifice. The villagers told stories of the Alpha King, Kaelin, a man who commanded fear, darkness, and ancient power. And they said her fate was sealed before she could even speak, a promise made by kings and queens long gone. She had grown up in the solitude of her estate, surrounded by the distant mountains and endless forests that hid secrets older than memory. Her childhood had been quiet, almost too quiet, save for the stories her mother whispered at night, tales of shadows and bloodlines, curses and sacrifices, and a king whose power no mortal could resist. Alara's mother had always said, "One day he will come for you. You must be strong, my child, stronger than fear itself." Alara's days had been measured and orderly. She spent hours reading old manuscripts, learning about herbs, history, and the strange magic that lingered in their world like a half-forgotten dream. She had never imagined what it would mean when Kaelin himself appeared at her doorstep, a storm of power and command that could silence the sun. The morning he came, the sky had turned an unnatural shade of gray, and the wind carried whispers that made the trees bend as if they were bowing. Alara had been walking along the edge of her garden, feeling the first tremors of something she could not name. The air seemed heavier, charged with a presence that pressed against her chest like the weight of 1,000 forgotten nights. Then he appeared, Kaelin. He came not with fanfare, not with heralds or trumpets, but as if he had emerged from the very mist itself. His cloak was dark, embroidered with symbols Alara did not recognize. His eyes were sharp, the color of storm clouds, and they seemed to pierce through everything she thought she knew about the world or about herself. He carried himself with a certainty that made the ground beneath her feel fragile. Alara froze, unsure whether to run or stay. Her heart pounded with fear, but there was something else, a strange pull that made her want to look into his eyes, even as every instinct told her to turn away. "Are you Alara?" His voice was calm, almost gentle, yet carried the weight of mountains. It was the kind of voice that could bend wills or crush hope. I am," she whispered, barely finding the courage to speak. Kaelin's lips curved into a faint, unreadable smile. "The one promised to me. The one foretold in the old bloodlines." His gaze swept over her as though he were measuring her spirit, weighing it against the promise that had been written centuries ago. Alara's stomach churned. All her life, she had imagined this moment. She had imagined fear, dread, maybe even anger, but nothing had prepared her for the intensity of being truly seen, not as a person, but as a destiny. "My lord," she began, but the words caught in her throat. What could she say to a king who had come to claim her as a promise? Kaelin stepped closer. The air around him seemed to darken, and the shadows in the garden stretched and twisted like living things. "You feel it too, don't you?" he said softly. "The bond that has waited for centuries." Alara did not answer. She could feel it. Something ancient hummed in her veins, a vibration older than her memory, older than the mountains. It was as if the earth itself had been holding its breath for this moment. Kaelin extended his hand, not with cruelty, but with an authority that made her want to obey. "Come with me," he said. "The world has changed while you waited. Your life begins anew, though it is no longer yours to control." Fear and curiosity warred within Alara. She wanted to run, to hide, to cling to the life she had known. Yet a part of her, a part she had never named, wanted to step forward. She took a hesitant step, then another, and finally she placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, a spark of magic flared, invisible yet palpable. A mark appeared on her wrist, a faint sigil that glowed like the first light of dawn. Alara gasped, feeling the binding of the ancient promise settle into her very soul. Kaelin's eyes softened for the briefest instant, and then his mask of authority returned. "The binding has begun," he said. "It will not break, not even if the world ends. You belong to this fate, and I am its keeper." Alara tried to speak, but the words failed her. Instead, she followed him, her steps trembling as they walked through the garden and toward the forest beyond. Every tree seemed alive, watching, whispering. Every shadow bent toward them, curious, cautious, hungry. The journey was silent except for the wind. Kalen walked with a grace that seemed almost unnatural, his cloak trailing behind him like a dark river. Ilara struggled to keep up, her mind racing. Questions she had held all her life now demanded answers. Who was he truly? Why had her parents agreed to this promise? Was she truly meant to die, or was the prophecy something else entirely? As they approached the mountains, the forest thickened. The air grew colder, sharper, carrying scents of earth, stone, and something wild and untamed. The silence was broken only by distant howls and the rustle of leaves. Ilara shivered, not entirely from the cold. Kalen stopped at the edge of a cliff, overlooking a valley choked with mist. Below, a river glimmered like silver, cutting through the darkness. He turned to her, and for the first time his eyes were not storm clouds. They were mirrors reflecting 1,000 unspoken emotions. "You fear me," he said simply. Ilara swallowed hard. I do. And yet," he continued, his voice lower, softer, "you did not run." She could not answer. How could she? There was fear, yes, but also an inexplicable connection she could not deny. Every tale she had been told, every warning, seemed to blur in the presence of Kalen. He was both terrifying and magnetic, a force of nature she could neither resist nor fully comprehend. Kalen's gaze fell to the mark on her wrist. "The sigil binds us," he said. "It marks the start of what was promised, but promises are not always chains. Sometimes they are keys." Ilara's heart skipped. Keys. Could she really hope for choice in this destiny? Or was he speaking of something beyond her understanding, something dangerous and alluring? Suddenly, the mist in the valley below began to swirl, forming shapes that were more than clouds and shadows. Dark figures moved in the haze, whispering, calling. The forest behind them shivered, and the wind rose to a howl. Kalen stepped in front of her, placing himself between Ilara and the swirling darkness. "You must trust me," he said, and in that instant the authority in his voice became armor and shield. "I do not ask for blind obedience. I ask for courage." Ilara's breath caught. Courage. It was all she had ever truly been taught, all she had been told she needed. And now, standing at the edge of this cursed land with the Alpha King himself, she realized it was not just bravery she needed. It was understanding, intuition, and the strength to face what even legends feared to name. The mist rose higher, and the shadows of the forest seemed to stretch toward them. Kalen's hand found hers again, steady, grounding. "The journey begins," he said, "and nothing will ever be the same." Ilara nodded, feeling the weight of fate settle over her like a cloak, heavy and unavoidable. The binding had begun, and with it, the first threads of an impossible bond. She looked into Kalen's eyes, and for the first time she felt the strange, dizzying mixture of fear, awe, and something that might be hope. As they stepped forward together into the swirling mist, the wind carried a single whisper through the trees, a warning or perhaps a greeting. "You were promised," it said, "and now you are claimed." Ilara's heart raced, her mind a storm of questions, and yet a small spark of defiance flickered inside her. She would survive. Somehow she would endure, and perhaps she could even change what was promised. But as the mist closed around them, hiding the path ahead, a single thought burned in her mind. She was no longer merely Ilara of the estate. She was the promised, the bound, and the Alpha King had come to claim her. And in that moment, she understood the truth of her mother's words. She must be stronger than fear itself. Cliffhanger. As the mist swallowed them, the shadows began to shift into shapes she could almost recognize, faces, figures, and eyes that seemed to watch her very soul. Something ancient, angry, and powerful stirred in the darkness, and Kalen's hand tightened around hers. "They know you are here," he whispered, "and they will not wait." The fortress of the Alpha King rose from the mountains like a dark sentinel. Its walls were black stone, carved with ancient runes that glimmered faintly under the gray sky. Alara had never seen anything so grand and terrifying. Even the wind seemed to bow before it, carrying whispers of forgotten kings, lost souls, and magic older than the world. Kalen led her through the massive gates without a word, his hand still holding hers. The warmth of his touch was both comforting and frightening. Every step she took inside the fortress made her heart pound. She had imagined danger all her life, but nothing could have prepared her for this. The weight of centuries, the heavy shadows, and the sense that she had stepped into a world where every corner was watching. "Stay close," Kalen said softly, his voice echoing against the cold stone walls. "The fortress remembers. It knows who belongs here and who does not." Alara nodded, gripping the edge of her cloak. She had so many questions, but the words would not come. Her mind raced with fear, wonder, and something she could not yet name, something that stirred in her chest every time she looked at Kalen. They passed halls lined with statues of warriors and kings, faces frozen in expressions of pain, courage, and defiance. Alara could feel their presence, as if their spirits were watching, waiting to see what she would do. The fortress itself seemed alive, breathing around them. Finally, they entered a large hall, lit by flickering torches. The floor was polished stone, and the air was heavy with the scent of incense and old magic. A few figures bowed as Kalen entered, their eyes wary, respectful, and a little fearful. "Your Grace," one of them said, a man with silver hair and a stern expression. "She has arrived." Kalen nodded. "Yes, she has arrived. She is the one promised." Alara's heart skipped. The title "promised" made her feel both important and small, like a fragile piece in a game she did not understand. Kalen turned to her. "This is your new home, at least for now. You must learn the ways of the fortress, its rules, and its dangers. Only then will you understand your place here." Alara swallowed hard. I will try, my lord," she said, though the words felt inadequate. Kalen's eyes softened for a moment. "Do not try, Alara. Act, feel. Understand, you are stronger than you believe." He led her through twisting corridors, past massive doors, and into chambers filled with scrolls, books, and artifacts. Every object seemed charged with power. Alara ran her fingers over the edges of a carved chest, feeling the hum of energy beneath her fingertips. She realized that this fortress was more than a home. It was a living archive of magic and memory, a place where every stone had a story. Over the following days, Kalen began to test her, not with cruelty, but with challenges that would reveal her courage, wit, and resilience. He asked her to navigate halls that shifted like illusions, to identify herbs and poisons, and to face magical traps that could disorient even the most skilled warriors. Each task terrified her, but she began to see something unexpected. Kalen was not merely testing her, he was teaching her. He watched closely, correcting mistakes gently, guiding her without holding her hand. She began to sense a strange bond forming between them, one that was not just fear or duty. It was connection, respect, and something deeper she did not yet understand. One evening, Kalen brought her to a balcony overlooking the mountains. The wind was cold, carrying the scent of pine and stone. The sky was a canvas of gray clouds, and the valley below was shrouded in mist. "Do you understand the weight of what you carry?" Kalen asked, his voice almost tender. Alara looked at him, unsure. I think so. But it is difficult. I feel so small, so powerless." Kalen shook his head. "You are not powerless. You are bound by destiny, yes, but destiny does not mean weakness. It means choice, if you have the courage to take it." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. His words, calm and commanding, stirred something inside her. She wanted to believe him, but fear lingered like a shadow. As the days passed, their bond grew in subtle ways. Kalen would sometimes speak of the curse that bound him to the throne, a magic that allowed him to claim the promised sacrifice but slowly consumed him from within. He never asked her to pity him, but she found herself drawn to the glimpses of vulnerability he allowed. She realized slowly that her role was not only to survive. She could influence him, perhaps even free him from the chains of the curse. It was a dangerous thought, one that made her pulse quicken and her mind spin. One night, Kaelin summoned her to the library, a massive hall filled with tomes, scrolls, and strange artifacts. The firelight cast long shadows across the walls, making the room feel alive. "You have grown stronger," Kaelin said, standing near the hearth. "Faster than I expected, but strength alone is not enough. You must understand me, the curse, and the spirits that linger in this fortress." Elara nodded, trying to steady her voice. "I want to understand. I want to help." Kaelin's eyes softened, and for a moment he seemed almost human, almost vulnerable. "Help, yes. That is the first step toward changing destiny. But be warned, the curse does not forgive easily and the spirits are patient hunters." Elara shivered. "Spirits." Kaelin gestured to the shadows around them. "The past does not rest. Every sacrifice, every betrayal, every promise, it leaves a trace. The fortress remembers, and the spirits will test you. They will try to break you as they tried to break me." Her stomach knotted with fear, but she also felt determination. If she could survive the fortress, survive Kaelin's trials, she could perhaps survive herself. Days turned into nights filled with lessons, trials, and quiet moments. Kaelin watched her closely, sometimes in silence, sometimes with soft words that revealed the man behind the Alpha King. He spoke of loss, of battles won and lost, of loneliness that stretched across decades. And with each revelation, Elara's heart softened. She began to see him not just as a king or a figure of fear, but as a man shaped by power, pain, and the weight of promises centuries old. One evening, as a storm raged outside, Kaelin found her standing at the edge of a balcony, staring into the valley below. Rain slicked the stones and lightning illuminated the fortress in brilliant flashes. "You are thinking about the binding," he said quietly, joining her side. Elara looked at him. "I cannot stop thinking. I feel trapped, and yet I feel something else. Something I do not understand." Kaelin's gaze softened and he reached for her hand. "It is natural. Fear and longing often walk together. You are learning the truth of your strength and the truth of your heart. Both are dangerous, yet both are powerful." She shivered, both from the cold and from the weight of his words. The closeness, the power, the strange intimacy. It was frightening and intoxicating. Suddenly, a shadow moved across the balcony, almost too fast to see. The air shifted, carrying whispers that made her skin crawl. Kaelin's grip tightened and his eyes darkened. "They are here," he said, his voice low, tense. "The spirits, they know you are learning, they know you are bound, and they will not wait." Elara's heart raced. The lessons, the bond, the growing trust, all of it suddenly felt fragile in the face of an unseen enemy. Kaelin turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Tonight, you will see the first test, not of strength alone, but of courage, of will, and of heart. Remember, fear is a guide, not a master." The storm outside intensified, thunder rolling across the mountains like the footsteps of giants. Elara felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. She had come to the fortress to face a destiny written before her birth, but she now realized that her fate was not yet fully decided. Her choices, her courage, her strength, they would shape more than her own life. As the first shadow moved closer, forming shapes that were almost human yet entirely other, Kaelin whispered, "Do not falter, trust yourself and trust me." Elara took a deep breath. The storm raged, the shadows advanced, and the fortress itself seemed to hold its breath. She stepped forward into the unknown and felt the strange, intoxicating pull of fear and power intertwine. For the first time, she understood what it truly meant to be the promised. Not to be claimed, not to be bound, but to face the darkness and perhaps to change it. Cliffhanger, as the shadows lunged from the darkness, shapes of long-forgotten warriors and spirits of ancient sacrifices, Kaelin stepped in front of her, his eyes blazing with power. Hold fast, he said. They will test us both. And one misstep, his voice faltered for the first time, could mean the end of everything. The journey beyond the fortress was nothing like Alara had ever imagined. The mountains loomed above them like giants, their jagged peaks slicing into the gray sky. Below, the forests twisted and tangled, dark with ancient magic and the weight of secrets long forgotten. The path was narrow, dangerous, and alive. Every step seemed to echo with whispers, shadows following their movements as if curious, cautious, and perhaps threatening. Kalen walked ahead, his presence a shield against the unknown. His cloak whipped around him in the wind, and every movement he made seemed deliberate, precise, commanding. Alara followed, her heart pounding, her senses alive to every sound, the rustle of leaves, the cry of distant creatures, and the low, persistent hum of the land itself. "You must stay close," Kalen said, his voice calm yet firm. "The spirits here do not forgive mistakes." Alara nodded, gripping the edge of her cloak. She had survived the fortress, faced its trials, and endured Kalen's tests. But this was different. The wilderness itself seemed alive, a presence that watched, judged, and waited. The first night they camped in a small clearing, surrounded by trees so old they seemed to touch the sky. Kalen built a fire, and its light flickered across the shadows, casting strange shapes. Alara shivered, not from the cold but from the weight of the unknown. "You are brave," Kalen said softly, watching her, "perhaps braver than I expected." Alara looked at him, unsure how to respond. I am afraid," she admitted, "but I do not want to fail." Kalen's eyes softened, and for a moment the fierce Alpha King seemed human, almost vulnerable. "Fear is natural. Courage is not the absence of fear, Alara. It is the choice to move forward despite it. Remember that." She nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle deep inside her. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting even when fear threatened to paralyze her. That night, she dreamt of shadows. Faces appeared in the firelight of her mind, warriors, kings, and women with eyes like hers. They whispered her name, their voices carrying warnings and secrets. She woke with a start, her body trembling, and Kalen was watching her as always. "You dreamt of them," he said quietly, "the spirits of the past. They have not forgotten, and they do not forgive easily." Alara swallowed hard. "What do they want?" "They test," Kalen said, his eyes darkening. "They test you, me, and everything that binds this land. They will try to break you. Only together can we face them." The next days were a series of trials unlike any she had imagined. The forests were alive with spirits, creatures that could bend reality, and illusions that preyed on fear and doubt. Alara was forced to confront visions of failure, loss, and betrayal. Every trial was a test not only of strength but of spirit and heart. Kalen was by her side, guiding without commanding, protecting without suffocating. She began to see the man behind the Alpha King, the loneliness, the burden of power, the desire for freedom from a curse that had held him for centuries. She began to care for him, not as a prisoner or master, but as a man who was strong, broken, and endlessly fascinating. One evening, after narrowly escaping a grove of whispering shadows that had tried to pull her into the earth itself, Kalen and Alara reached a ruined temple. Its stones were blackened with age, carved with symbols she could barely understand. The air hummed with magic, and she could feel the presence of countless souls lingering within its walls. "This is the place," Kalen said, "the ritual site. Here we confront the power that binds me. Here your courage will be tested like never before." Alara's stomach tightened. She had faced illusions, shadows, and the unpredictable dangers of the forest. But this felt final. The air was thick with power, heavy with the weight of centuries. "You are afraid," Kalen said, stepping closer. "Good, fear sharpens the mind. But do not let it chain you. You must act, not react." Alara nodded, gripping the mark on her wrist. The sigil burned faintly, a reminder of the binding, the promise, and the path she had chosen to walk. She took a deep breath, centering herself. The ritual began as soon as they entered the temple. Shadows coalesced, forming figures of warriors, queens, and kings, sacrifices of the past, bound by promises and broken oaths. They circled Kalen and Alara, whispering, testing, judging. The air crackled with magic and the ground beneath them seemed alive, pulsing with energy. Kalen stepped forward, his voice strong, chanting words older than memory. Alara followed, repeating the incantations, feeling the power flow through her. She realized in that moment that she was not merely a pawn, she was a participant. Her courage, her will, her heart, it mattered. She was shaping the outcome, changing destiny with every word, every gesture. The spirits attacked, their forms flickering like firelight, striking with illusions of pain and fear. Alara faced visions of her family, her estate burning, Kalen falling, herself failing. She staggered but did not fall. Kalen's hand found hers, grounding her, reminding her of strength and trust. "You are stronger than they think," he said, his voice cutting through the illusions. "Do not let them break you." Alara focused, feeling the courage that had been building inside her since the fortress. She spoke the words of the ritual with clarity, her voice steady even as the shadows screamed. The mark on her wrist glowed brighter, and she felt the connection between her and Kalen deepen, the bond forged in fear and trust, pain and longing. The spirits wailed, their forms twisting, dark and beautiful, terrible and mesmerizing. Kalen's power surged, protecting her, but he was strained. She realized then that she was not only saving herself, she was helping to save him, to free him from the curse that had bound him for centuries. In a final act of courage, Alara stepped forward, placing herself in the center of the ritual. Her heart pounded, fear and determination intertwining. She felt the weight of every promise, every sacrifice, every life lost and claimed. And yet she did not falter. The spirits recoiled at her courage, their forms dissipating like mist under sunlight. The ritual reached its climax, and a shockwave of energy swept through the temple. Kalen fell to his knees, exhausted, the curse that had clung to him like a shadow beginning to loosen. Alara rushed to him, supporting him, her heart racing. "Kalen, are you all right?" He looked up at her, eyes blazing with emotion she could not name. You have done it," he said, his voice thick with awe and relief. "You freed me in ways I could not imagine." Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of triumph, fear, and something deeper, something that went beyond words. She had faced the darkness, survived, and in doing so had become part of Kalen's redemption. For a long moment they sat in silence, the temple calm around them, the shadows gone, the ritual complete. Then Kalen reached for her, his hand brushing hers with a gentleness that made her heart leap. "You were magnificent," he said softly, "stronger than I could have hoped. You changed destiny, Alara, and in doing so you have changed me." Alara looked at him, her breath catching. The man she had feared, admired, and slowly come to trust and care for was here, vulnerable, human, and deeply moved. The bond between them was no longer just the binding of a promise. It was something real, something alive, something that neither fear nor destiny could undo. Yet, even as relief settled over them, a new unease stirred. The valley outside the temple was no longer quiet. Dark clouds churned and distant lightning illuminated shapes in the mist. The forest beyond the mountains seemed to shift and pulse with life, as if aware of their actions, waiting for the next move. Kalen stood, his expression hardening. "This is not over," he said, voice low and tense. "The spirits we faced were only a part of the curse. There are forces in this land, old and patient, that will not forgive what we have done. We must prepare. We must be ready." Alara nodded, feeling both fear and determination. She had survived the fortress, faced the forest, and participated in a ritual older than memory. She would not falter now. As they stepped outside, the wind carried whispers, cold and insistent, promising that the trials were far from finished. The forest seemed alive with intent, and the storm above churned like an angry god. Kalen's hand found hers again, and in that touch she felt strength, protection, and a promise. "Together," he said. Alara nodded, her heart full of courage, trust, and a strange, unfamiliar longing. Together. And as they walked toward the mountains, the storm above them breaking with distant thunder, a new shadow moved in the mist, watching, waiting, patient, and dangerous. Something ancient had noticed them, and the journey was far from over. Cliffhanger. In the distance, a dark figure emerged, taller than any man, cloaked in shadow, its eyes glowing faintly with a fire that promised both power and peril. Kalen tightened his grip on Alara's hand. "They are coming," he whispered, "and this time we may not be ready." The mountains rose like dark sentinels around them, their jagged peaks cutting through the stormy sky. Rain fell in sheets, and the wind whipped through the valleys like a living thing, carrying whispers of the ancient spirits that lingered in the land. Alara's cloak clung to her skin, her hair plastered to her face, but she moved forward without hesitation. Beside her, Kalen was a dark figure of strength and purpose, his eyes scanning the misted peaks as if he could see beyond the storm itself. "This is it," Kalen said, his voice low, carrying over the roar of the wind. "The cliffs where it all began. The place where the prophecy was spoken, the place where the final choice must be made." Alara's heart raced. She had faced the fortress, battled shadows, and participated in the ancient ritual to free Kalen from his curse. But this felt ultimate. The air was thick with magic, the land pulsing beneath their feet. She could feel the weight of centuries pressing down on her, the eyes of the past upon them, and the storm itself seemed to challenge their presence. Kalen's hand found hers, grounding her, anchoring her to the present. "Do you feel it?" he asked. "The power here, the spirits, the fate of this kingdom." Alara nodded, her grip tightening around his hand. "I feel it, and I am ready." The cliffs were treacherous. Jagged rocks jutted out like teeth, and the path wound narrowly along the edge of the precipice. Below, the valley was swallowed in mist, dark and endless. The wind threatened to throw them off balance, but Kalen moved with certainty, every step deliberate. As they reached the center of the cliff, the storm above intensified, lightning slicing the sky, thunder rolling across the peaks. The spirits of the past began to appear, their forms more solid than ever before. Warriors, queens, and kings of ages long gone hovered in the swirling mist, their eyes fixed on Alara and Kalen. Their whispers became words, echoing across the precipice, warnings, accusations, and demands for justice. "You cannot stop them," one spirit said, its voice like ice. "The binding is eternal." Kalen stepped forward, standing protectively in front of Alara. "We will see," he said firmly. "The past may judge, but we are not prisoners of it. We choose our path." Alara drew a deep breath. She had feared this moment, imagined it, even dreaded it. But standing there, hand in hand with Kalen, she felt a power she had never known, a combination of courage, love, and determination that seemed to burn within her chest. She was no longer merely the promised, she was a force in her own right. The spirits moved closer, their forms shifting and twisting, testing them. Some reached for Kalen, trying to pull him back into the curse's grip. Others circled around Alara, whispering fears and regrets, illusions meant to break her resolve. But she stood firm, her heart steady, her mind clear. Kalen raised his voice, chanting words of power, ancient and resonant. The storm seemed to respond, lightning striking the cliffs around them, magic rippling through the air. Alara repeated the incantations, her voice ringing out over the wind, stronger with every word. She felt the mark on her wrist burning brighter, the sigil connecting her to Kalen in a bond of strength, trust, and destiny. The spirits shrieked, their forms flickering, twisting, but they could not break the connection between the two. Alara realized something profound. The ritual, the fortress, the journey, all had prepared her not just to survive, but to transform destiny itself. Kalen looked at her, his eyes filled with awe and something softer, gratitude, admiration, and a deep, unspoken longing. "You are remarkable," he said. "Stronger than even I could have hoped. Together we can break this." Alara's chest swelled with emotion. Fear, relief, and a new, thrilling sense of purpose coursed through her veins. She stepped closer to him, feeling the warmth and strength of his presence. "Then let us end this," she said firmly. "Together." The spirits lashed out one final time, their forms solid and terrifying. Kalen raised his hands, summoning every ounce of his power, every lesson learned, every moment of courage he had endured. Alara mirrored him, chanting the final words of the ritual, her voice strong, unwavering, fearless. A surge of energy erupted from them, bright and blinding, scattering the spirits like leaves in a storm. The wind screamed, lightning cracked, and the earth trembled beneath their feet. Alara felt the connection between her and Kalen deepen, a bond not of fear, not of promise, but of choice, courage, and heart. When the light dimmed, the storm began to calm. The spirits had vanished, leaving only the mist and the faint echo of their whispers. The curse that had bound Kalen loosened, dissipating like smoke in the wind. For the first time in centuries he stood free, not just in body but in spirit. Alara looked at him, her chest heaving, her heart pounding. "It's done," she whispered. "It's really done." Kalen reached for her hand, his eyes soft, almost vulnerable. "No," he said, "it is not done, not yet. This is only the beginning, but now we are free to choose, to decide what comes next." Alara nodded, understanding. The binding, the promise, the prophecy, they had survived all of it. But what came next was theirs to shape. And for the first time she felt hope, not just for herself, but for him, for them, and for the kingdom. They stood together on the cliffs, the storm subsiding, the mist rolling through the valley below. The land was quiet now, alive with the hum of magic and life. It was a new beginning, fragile and beautiful. Kalen turned to her, his expression a mixture of awe and something deeper, something tender. "You have changed me, Alara, not just by facing the curse, but by showing me courage, compassion, and strength. You have given me something I thought I could never have." Alara felt her heart skip. "And you have shown me power, trust, and the possibility of a destiny we can shape together. I never thought I could feel this way, but I do." He reached for her, and for the first time there was no fear, no tension, only the quiet strength of two hearts bound not by promise, but by choice. They clasped hands, feeling the bond pulse between them, a connection forged in trials, in courage, and in mutual respect and longing. The valley below shimmered in the last light of the storm. Birds, sensing the calm, rose into the sky. The forest seemed to breathe again, alive with the memory of what had been endured and the hope of what was yet to come. Kalen turned his gaze toward the horizon. "The kingdom is not fully healed," he said softly. "There are shadows yet, remnants of the old curse. But now we face them together, as partners, not as master and pawn." Alara smiled, feeling a weight lift from her heart. "Together," she echoed, her voice strong, "we will face whatever comes." For a long moment, they stood side by side, watching the mist swirl through the valley, the clouds parting to reveal the first hints of sunlight. It was a quiet, peaceful moment, the kind that comes only after storms, after battles, after trials that test every ounce of courage and heart. And then from the edge of the mist, a new shadow moved, a figure cloaked in darkness, taller than any man, eyes glowing faintly with ancient fire. It was a reminder that the world was not yet entirely safe, that trials would continue, that the darkness was patient and enduring. Kalen tightened his grip on Alara's hand. "They are coming," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "But this time we are ready, we face them together." Alara nodded, feeling the truth of his words. Fear was still there, yes, but it no longer controlled her. Courage, trust, and love had taken its place. She would not falter, she would not run, and she would not be claimed again, except by her own choices, her own heart. The storm had passed, but the winds of destiny continued to blow. And for the first time, Alara felt that she and Kaelin could stand against them, not as pawn and king, not as promised and claimant, but as equals bound by courage, trust, and a connection deeper than prophecy. They looked out over the valley together, hand in hand, hearts beating in sync. The past had tested them, the spirits had challenged them, and the curse had tried to break them. But together they had endured, and together they would face whatever the future held. Alara rested her head lightly against Kaelin's shoulder, feeling the warmth and strength of the man who had once terrified her, now standing as her partner, her protector, and something more, her heart's companion. As the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the mountains, Kaelin whispered, "The kingdom may still hold shadows, but as long as we stand together, no darkness can claim us." Alara smiled, hope shining in her eyes. "Then let the future come," she said softly. "We are ready." And in that moment, atop the jagged cliffs, with the wind carrying whispers of the past and promises of the future, Alara and Kaelin embraced, not as master and promised, not as king and sacrifice, but as equals bound by courage, trust, and the power of choice. The storm had ended, the curse had lifted, and a new chapter had begun, one they would face together, hand in hand, hearts unbroken and spirits unbound. Cliffhanger/epilogue hook. As they turned to leave the cliffs, a distant howl echoed across the valley, deeper and older than anything they had faced. It was a reminder. The world of shadows was vast, patient, and eternal. But now Alara and Kaelin were ready, together, to face whatever darkness awaited.